Good evening, everybody. I think we're on live now. I'm Paul Woodadge. This is WW2TV again for another live stream. Joining me tonight, two guests from Rhode Island in the USA is George Luz Jr., son of George Luz, and joining me from Belgium, not actually in Bastogne tonight, but up the road from Bastogne is Reg Jans, tour guide extraordinaire, historian. And we're going to be talking about Easy Company, 506, but particularly talking about George's relationship with his father, going to the reunions and what have you. George is going to be presenting to us a 30-minute show he has done a few times before in the USA for people, various groups and things, including some rare audio clips of some of the veterans talking, which is really cool. So you won't have heard that before, most of you. So that'll be really exciting. So good evening, Reg. Good evening, George. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Paul, nice to be here. It's a pleasure to talking to you again.
It is. It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Reg. Well, we haven't had you on my show, but always a pleasure to be with you, Reg. You're my baldy brother. We've got the same barber.
Same hairstyle.
Same hairstyle.
I selected
George, sorry.
No, I was just saying.
Reg has got his logo. I've got my logo behind me. And Reg has his on his shirt. So there
but I got my special outfit. I even put on my special glasses. They're brand new, actually. And I'm still getting used to these glasses because, you know, for a long time I really believed I was a vampire because I couldn't see myself in the mirror. You know. But then my doctor says, "Don't worry, Reggie, it's the eyes." So I was like, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah, no, I have to wear glasses for everything now. I mean, I'm too vain to wear them doing these shows. I have them beside me, so I have to kind of pretend I can see better than I can. And we've got Susan Finn is watching us. So we've got another Easy Company alumni watching the show. So hello, Susan. So
hello,
George,
Susan.
How did this little presentation of yours come about? When did you first start thinking about doing a little show?
Well, thank you, Paul. Actually, this project began in a farmhouse in Normandy several years ago. You, Jack Beckett, Chris Langlois, a bunch of the actors, we're at that World War II Foundation event with Tim Gray. And, we're just sitting around looking at some of my dad's pictures and, everyone seemed to enjoy it. So, and one thing I did also enjoy was those croissants you brought over every morning. Those were fantastic. And,
the Normandy croissant, and the pain au chocolat, wonderful stuff,
Those were great. And then, people used to ask me, hey, why don't you do more about your dad, tell more stories, maybe do some speeches and stuff. And I would always say, there's enough guys around that really can tell their stories. And, it's better if they tell their stories. We'll all get more out of it if they tell their stories. But I remember recently you interviewed a Mr. Kirsch.
Yep.
And who was a veteran in Normandy who landed on Gold Beach. And you said it's a rare opportunity to speak with someone who was part of the invasion. These opportunities are getting less and less. So, I developed this over the last few years, understanding that we're losing these guys and the opportunity is getting less and less. So that's kind of how it all developed.
Well, brilliant stuff. And, I've been privy to seeing your photos and hearing some of your rare audio clips, and it's a privilege that you've chosen WW2TV to air this to a larger audience. Brilliant stuff. And as you always say, George, something that one of the things I admire about you is your father was one of 16 million men and women in uniform in the USA, and one of however many millions around the world, and the Brits, the Aussies, the New Zealanders, the Canadians, the Poles, the Belgians, the Dutch, everybody else, the Danes and Norwegians, all fought together. And it's just that this spotlight fell upon E Company 506. But when we were talking the other day, George, you were surprised when I pointed out that the E Company reunions that were normal for you as a young adult growing up, actually a lot of units didn't meet up after the war. So for whatever reason, Bill Garnier and Dick Winters and those guys started a very regular meeting just after the war, and it wasn't the case universally. I mean, Reg, perhaps you can join in. I mean, you've taken lots of 101st Airborne veterans. Easy Company's reunions were really quite special. 3rd Battalion used to do quite a lot of stuff, didn't they? But you must have taken guys in the 50 Deuce who never had reunions at all. Is that right, Reg?
Well, that's correct. It was not every unit because, first of all, you have to have the guys who start up organizing, putting these reunions together after the war, which wasn't as easy as it would be today. You know, now you got the internet, you know, social media, cell phones, stuff like that. Back then, you know, most of the guys went back home, tried to pick up their lives, you know, use GI Bill, go back to school and stuff, living in all different parts of the United States, you know, and not staying in touch. So get them all together by postal mail, and putting a proper reunion together was not that very common for every unit.
So we're just fortunate that for whatever reason, mostly through Bill Garnier's efforts and people like Mike Ranny doing the newsletter and Dick himself for keeping the archives, that we had this body, which is part of the reason of why the show ended up being on that unit, because there was this continuity, and there was some archives, and there was letters being kept. And anyway, so enough of me rambling. George, you might as well start your PowerPoint presentation now. So folks watching this, this is a PowerPoint that George is using on his computer that we're then sending via Zoom, via YouTube. So it's going through several chains of things. So it worked a few minutes ago in practice. So let's hope it works again. And Reg and I will kind of jump in with various memories of our encounters with the veterans. But basically, for the first sort of half an hour of the show, it's George telling his memories. So sit back and enjoy it. So when you're ready to start sharing, here we go.
All right, let's just do this and that. All right, let's see. From the beginning. Uh-oh, what happened?
It's good, I think, so far. Just got to press
it coming
play.
Up on the screen?
Yeah, we've got the screen. The screen's shared. You just got to press play, I think, now.
It's frozen.
Is it?
Okay, let's see. Let me share. There we go.
There we go. There's millions watching, George. Sort yourself out.
All right, so like you were saying, Paul, you know, they did stay together, and Winters was a master at keeping the guys connected. And I'm going to start with this letter here, and it's dated July 7th, 1992, and it says, "Dear George, June 5th, 1992, 19 of the original Company band of brothers recall their memories on the night of June 5 and 6, 1944, for the families and many friends at the Eisenhower Center at the University of New Orleans. Steve Ambrose was good enough to send me a tape of that meeting, and personally, I will always treasure this tape and the memories that evening. After listening to it, I am convinced that we will never be able to quite duplicate that group with its spontaneity, enthusiasm, and old feeling of togetherness. It was wonderful. Listen to it for yourself and see if you agree. Hang tough, Dick Winters." Well, tonight you'll get a chance to hear a little bit of that evening. This first clip is Ambrose just providing kind of an overview of what was going on in London at that time.
It's right now 12:31. 48 years ago, the Brits were on double daylight savings time. So 48 years ago, it was 1:30 in the morning of June 6th. 1944, and it was just about at precisely that moment that Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division led the way on the invasion.
Yeah, so that was Stephen Ambrose just trying to give an overview of what was going to transpire that evening. And that evening, what happened was all the officers got up, including Winters, and then they told their little slice of what happened on D-Day. You know, this was a shot of Toye, and Camp Toye in 1942. you know, everybody's out there practicing maneuvering the obstacle course and on and on. But if you look in the top left of the screen, you'll see the path, and that looks like the path that's going up to climb Currahee, you know, 3 miles up and 3 miles down. And I've done that quite a few times in an SUV. But, you know, it's just a great shot of what was there. And this was where Colonel Sink was going to, what was the saying there? Let's say, separate the men from the boys. So, and then here is Dick Winters, and you know, the young man Damien who played him to the right. And this is Dick telling his story about landing on D-Day. And there's a little slice here at the end that I had not heard before. I'm sure other people have, but I had not heard before. It runs between a little over a minute and a half.
We were on course for Normandy at 2342, and the altitude was dropped now to 1,500 feet. After we got on hit the channel, we dropped to 500 feet. The reason being, they did not want the Germans to pick us up on radar. Not that we received the green light to jump. Normally, the plane will reduce in speed 95 to 100 miles an hour. However, on this one, when this plane started to have the hit, he turned the motors on all the way and started to dive. As I went out the door, I judged to myself, this must be 150 miles an hour. The result was, when the chute opened, the shock was so great, it tore everything off. The leg bag went off. Anything in my pockets was out. Going down, I was trying to keep my eye on my leg bag so I could get my equipment. I also had a machine gun trying to pick me up. So I slipped to avoid the machine gun fire and tried to slip towards the leg bag. Jumping at low altitude was down very quickly, landed in some trees, and got out of my chute as quickly as possible. As I said, the only thing I had at that point was my knife. We found out later the Germans had picked this large body of planes over England before we ever took off. And they were spreading the word to their headquarters, large movement of airplanes over England, suspect paratroopers are on the way, the invasion is coming.
Yeah, I had never heard that before until I had listened to this tape. And you guys were probably aware of that, right?
I have heard it before, yeah, but the people watching, I'm reading the comments on YouTube, and they think this is amazing. And just to add, because you said we could add stuff in, for those watching, where Dick came down, the orchard he came in just west of St. Mary-Glees, his leg bag, the famous leg bag, they actually landed the other side of the road that goes off west towards Lafayette. And the machine gun he refers to, which was either a twin barrel or possibly a 4-barrel 20mm anti-aircraft cannon manned by the Germans, for him to go across to get his leg bag, he would have to have crossed the road in about 20 feet in front of the Germans manning their machine gun. So I think 76 years later, we can forgive Dick for not making that journey across the road, because had he done so, he'd have got about halfway across that road, been killed, and we wouldn't be here today talking about E Company 506. So incredible stuff. So I'll let you continue, George. This is amazing.
Now here's my dad. This picture came from Peter Hendricks, and you know, Peter's just a terrific guy. He had sent this picture through Tony Coulter. He was writing in one of his new books, or one of his books, and he just wanted to double check that this was my dad. And as soon as it came up, man, I could see it. I said, "Gee whiz, wow, look at that cool picture!" And you know, off my dad's left shoulder is Babe. And so that was taken as they were heading into Eindhoven on the 18th. And I talked to Babe about that particular picture. And he said, your dad was just giving me a break from carrying the machine gun. You could see he's carrying Babe's machine gun and, you know, grenades all over. And you can't really see, but on the very top of my dad's helmet is one of those Dutch flags. And anyway, it's just a really cool picture of my dad that I really was so happy that Peter shared it with me. And then the young kid, Rick Gomez, who did a fantastic job portraying our father. You know, we couldn't thank him enough. And I think my dad would be very proud. But So tonight, for all of all your guests and your friends that have never heard some of these, you know, they've never heard my father's voice. So,
hey George,
so,
if I pick in a little bit on this photo?
Sure.
Because you can see on the photo with your dad and with Babe, it looks like Babe is like half as tall as your dad is. Of course, he's walking behind him. But for those who know or have known Babe, Babe was kind of a short guy at the time, pretty skinny person. And he was assigned to E Company back in England right after Normandy, before Market Garden. Now, he was assigned to Bill Garnier's squad, almost at the marshalling area where they were getting ready to jump into Normandy. I'm sorry, into Holland. And they were all there checking equipment, gearing up. And some guys show up at Garnier and they said, hey, I got some extra grenades and ammunition belts. Where should I put them? And Garnier says, well, give it to that new guy there down. Give it to Heffron, you know? So they walk up to Babe and they put it on Babe, all the stuff. So more guys showed up with extra equipment. So what should I do with this? And all the time, Garnier goes like, hey, give it to Heffron, give it to Heffron. And Babe was growing bigger and bigger by the second, you know, with stuff. And one moment he walks up to Garnier and says, hey, Sarge, what's this all about? And without looking up, Garnier says, well, we're jumping into Holland. I don't want to go look for you in Spain.
I didn't know that story. That's an excellent one.
Yeah, those two were something. So, but anyway, yeah. So this is an audio clip of my father, and he's talking a little bit about, you know, his preparation of jumping into Normandy and what he experienced.
Look at me, with a leg pack that weighed about 150 pounds. I lost mine too. So anyway, number 18 man gets in first, 17, 16. And Lieutenant Wells was left behind me. And it took two guys from the airport to take me up into that fight. Before I go on, he mentioned a guy named Cobb. Good. What's that again? Look at me in the audience. You're not behind me. We're all lined up. And I'm fifth man in the state. Fifth. I said to Lieutenant Welch, I'll never make the door. He said, well, change with Cobb. You just heard what happened with Cobb. He got shot in the room. He got shot in the room.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of folks didn't know that, you know, Cobb didn't make that jump, and it was because he did that. He switched with my father in that case, and I think it was illustrated in episode 4 in the series when Cobb was railing on a lot of the new guys, the replacements, and then Randleman came up and said, "Hey, Cobb, you remember you didn't jump either." So, but anyway, so that was a neat one. I'm glad I got a chance to share that because, yeah, a lot of people have never heard my dad's voice because he passed away before the series came out. So, all right. And then Joe Toye, you know, just tough as nails, amazing guy. And this audio clip here is him talking about him landing into Normandy, and he talks about taking out the guns, and it's all about Breakcore Manor as well. So this one runs about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes as well. And once again, I don't think anybody's here other than his family and his close circle. I don't think a lot of people have heard Joe Toye's voice. So here you go.
The bag went. I had my rifle because I had it strapped around my neck and across my body. So then I get down and hit the field, and it was a bright moonlight night. And after I got the chute off, I looked across another hedgerow. I see 2 troopers. They had their back to me. So I snuck around the hedgerow, and I got back at them, and I clicked my trigger. And the one guy turned around, he said, "You should have done that. I could have shot you. Only I had my gun in his back." The orders were to, when you see a group out in the field, report who you are. So I went out with, and I said, "Corporal Toye with 2 men." He said, "Fine, take the 2 men and go out on the left flank." In the night, I'll tell you, I didn't go out too far, but I went out. You know, at night, they try to keep contact right in the dark. Right, you couldn't go too far. So anyway, we joined up with Malarkey and Garnieri and Big Winters, and the group got together.
Well, we didn't have no rest. We just about got through the night. Somebody said we got to knock out some artillery pieces. That kid was busy for a couple of days. He went jumping on himself. I think I lasted 3-4 days. I don't know.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
That's amazing stuff. I mean, and not we go too much in the TV show, but you can. I hear when I'm hearing Joe Toye speak there, I'm hearing a lot of Bill Garnier as well. They sounded pretty similar, and I can kind of see why for casting they went with someone different, because Kirk, and I love Kirk. Kirk's performance as Toye is brilliant, but completely different to how Joe sounded. But I think that's to make the Toye character sort of a different one to Bill and the Philly kids, because yeah, amazing to hear his voice. Just incredible stuff. I shall shut up and let you keep on going, but I just wanted to make that point.
That's okay. That's okay. Hey, I like the additions. I certainly like the additions. Yeah, so Skinny Sisk, there's not a lot of stuff with Skinny, and there's not a lot of pictures of him. And Phil Barantini,
Phil Barantini.
Yeah, Phil played his role. This little clip here is Walter Gordon, and Walter was an amazing guy. And this came from a different tape from Ambrose's interviews with Walter, and he is describing the plane ride over, the flight over, and what Phil came up with, what Skinny came up with to kind of cut the tension on the plane.
But since on our plane, I'll never forget while we were there, all deep in thought, silent prayers, whatever you want to say. Sis comes up to this. Does anybody here want to buy a good watch? And I'll never forget that. Everybody started laughing. That kind of broke the tension. That was only a comment that I remember hearing. But does anybody here want to buy a good watch?
Yeah, that is just such a great line. I love that line. And I love listening to Walter's voice. He died the year before my dad died, but I got a chance to meet him several times at the reunions and stuff like that. And he was just a great man, big, tall, imposing man. And he was terrific. He's got, great son and Scotty, and 4 wonderful daughters, and Tracy and BB and Gay and Linda, that, we're all close. We're all close. So, but anyway.
They included that, anyone want to buy a good watch? They give that line to Perko, don't they, in episode 2? So somewhere along the line, they thought that line was too good. And Phil Barantini was talking, I think it was he and Scott Grimes were telling me that they did film them singing in the aircraft. They were singing a song, and in the end, that bit didn't make it to the show. Well, it was in the script. They were certainly going to have them singing and doing a little bit more kind of humorous stuff on board for Normally, but in the end, they just went with the tension of Winter standing in the door. But anyway, this is amazing stuff. I can't wait for the next bit now, George.
Okay. A lot of times I do a fair amount of traveling in Europe, not as much as you guys, but with Chris Anderson and Stephen Ambrose historical tours. In this particular area, this spot here overlooking Foy is probably the most significant place for me. This is where, elements of E Company made the attack on Foy, and where Lieutenant Dyke froze, and Lieutenant Spears took over and continued on and took Foy. And then, but in this area here is where Muck and Pinkala were killed. And, a lot of folks know you saw it in the series, or if you read it in the book.
Reg is shaking his head there. Reg wants to interject.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I certainly understand. That's why I said area.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But anyway, so, if you read the book, or if you saw it in the series, the book was accurate as far as how Muck and Pinkala got killed, and the series was more drama. But my dad I remember him telling me the story about how it went down and things like that. So it's a very emotional area for me to kind of be there. And I think of the families, Muck and Pinkala, them, and then their families and stuff. So, and then every time we go with Chris Anderson there, you know, we always go to the cemeteries and then we pay our visit to Skip Muck's grave, and I put a coin there, one of our challenge coins from the reunion. I put that there. And then over the years, I've had a chance to meet a lot of the family members, and these are the 4 nieces of Skip Muck, and the 2, Eileen and her daughter Becky, the 2 I'm more familiar with. And you know, they never really knew what happened to their uncle. They just knew their uncle died in World War II, and that was it. But there was a dedication to a monument in Tonawanda that we all went to. It was really cool. And a lot of folks who watched the series, there's Richard, who played Skip, and the woman in the middle is Faye Tanner, sweet Faye Tanner. If you remember, they talked about Skip's girlfriend.
Mm.
Well, this is her. So you know, that's, oh, hang on a second.
If someone's telling you're sharing all the Easy Company secrets, stop it.
Somebody's trying to sell me something. That's the only time that rings. So anyway, this is sweet Faye Tanner. You know, he talked about her in the series and stuff like that. And this is her husband Carl, and this was at that event. And then Alex Pinkala, you know, on that very same trip before where we visited Skip's, we went to Alex's grave as well. And you know, over the years, I've had a chance to meet his family as well. And most recently, this is Tim Pinkala, and we met, he came to the reunion in New Orleans last year. And so he's been able to gather more and more stuff about his uncle, who we never really knew. And he shared this kind of a one little article in a paper about his aunt. And it goes like this. It says, Alex's sister, Irene, was especially close growing up in South Bend, Indiana. She was the 9th and he was the 10th of 13 children. She used to tell people he died in the Battle of the Bulge. That's all we knew, she said. That's all they ever told us. And, you know, that, you know, however many thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people got that same thing. Mm-hmm. But at least in this particular case, they were able to find out exactly, you know, kind of how he was killed. So, and just one of the many, many casualties of World War II. But this year's reunion is scheduled to be in San Diego, coming up pretty soon. Coronavirus or bust, I'm not sure. So, and oh yeah, so this is the Winners Monument, you know, dedicated June 2012, the World War II Foundation, Tim Gray, and I'm very proud of participating in this. Just a little bit, I made a small contribution in helping getting this put together, and I've got some kind of breaking news actually. Paul, I think you'll find some interest in this. A good buddy of mine is leading up a project to put a French resistance monument in Normandy. Seeing how Normandy gets a lot of attention, it only seems right to give something back to the French people who do so much for us during these commemorations. This monument will honor all the efforts and sacrifices that the French resistance gave throughout France during the entire campaign, which is often overlooked. Stay tuned. This will go public around August 1st. Henry Roosevelt is the producer of the promo. So around August 1st, we'll hear more about that. So a monument overdue.
Definitely.
Yeah, because Mags has a direct connection to that, right, Paul? The French resistance?
Well, I mean, her family were occupied. None of her family were actively resistant in the sense they were going around and blowing stuff up, because they were in Normandy. In Normandy, the resistance was much more about intelligence gathering and just keeping the Allies didn't set up a big resistance in Normandy. So they were occupied and they had experienced the Germans and were grateful when the Allies arrived, but they weren't actively resistance as such. I'm trying to find, while you're talking, there's Eisenhower's quote about the resistance, but I can't find it now. But Eisenhower said something on the lines that the French resistance were worth 5 divisions of troops or something like that. But I can't, now I'm looking for it. I can't find it. But I will find it at some point and then share it. But yeah, no, a monument to the resistance is long overdue. And I think the idea of Americans saying thank you back to the French is also very worthy as well, because yeah, the French are eternally grateful for their liberation of the Allies and are always putting monuments up to the Allied troops. But people don't often think much about the suffering the French went through, and not just the resistance, just the fact they were occupied, the fact that the bombardments, all the loss of life in the bombing is a massive part of the Normandy story. And that the village where Mag's family are from, Saint Marcouf, up north of Utah, was the village in La Manche that had the most civilian casualties because of the bombing on June the 6th. I forget the exact figure now, but in the percentage terms, it was the most casualties of any village in that department. So Mag's family know all about the death that came with the invasion. You know, they were grateful for it, but it brought this toll of death of approximately 30,000 French killed in Normandy in 1944. 30,000.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, so well, there's yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So this was taken in 1956, like September 1956. Let's see, I think it's C.T. Smith is first. I'm not sure who's second. My dad is third. Ed Tipper's fourth. A bunch of the Rainey kids are sprinkled in there as well. This was at Webster's home in Los Angeles, the reunion in 56. And several months later, Webster wrote a letter to my dad, and it goes like this. Dear George, right now I'm trying to sell a nonfiction book about the war. Don't expect very much, though. I've got some fine photographs and wrote it up as best I could. There hasn't been a good, honest book about the paratroopers yet. I hope this is it. The market for such a story is nil, however, so I'm not counting too hard. No more war stories for me. I've tried that stuff far too long and too often to ever try again. Dave. In 1961, Webster was lost at sea off the coast of Santa Monica, California, around September 9th, while doing research for a book called Man, Myth, and Man-Eaters. The United States Coast Guard investigation concluded that it is reasonable to assume that he met his demise during the dive due to interference with one or more of the sharks. That book was published in 1962 by W.W. Norton. And with the help of Stephen Ambrose, this book was finally published in 1994, Parachute Infantry. And, if you've ever read it, it's a terrific book. It's a great story from Webster's perspective. And I get a big kick out of it because there's a lot of my dad in there. And my dad was pretty crazy. If you read that book, you'll know my father was crazy. And then, like we were talking earlier, guys, about the reunions, this was one of the reunions, I think, in the 80s. And, you look across the way and you just see all these familiar faces. You got Winters there and Jim Alley and Percani and Buck Taylor and Forrest and Phil Perugini. And my dad's kind of in the middle there with let's see if I can do the mouse. I don't want to. My dad's in the middle there, and yeah. And just on and on. Johnny Martin.
Johnny Martin there, yep. Malarkey,
Lipton with the silver hair, and Garnier and Stroll, and just on and on.
Paul Rogers as well, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really great to see those kinds of pictures, and those are a lot of what my dad has, and then I always love to share this picture. It's my mom and dad. It's my very first reunion in 1956. I was 9 years old. And so this was, I think my dad was 44 at the time. And the reason I want to illustrate this is because my mother came to the reunions like a lot of the wives. The reason these reunions were able to go as far as they were to go, is my thought, is because the wives bought into what the husbands thought or knew was important for their mental health, was to get together with their buddies every year. And it surely helped. I know my dad and a lot of his buddies. This was a highlight of his year. And I always credit the wives and the girlfriends that came to these reunions for really being the ones that kept them together. So, and then this was just one of the coolest trips I've ever been on. This was a morale tour. The Army had reached out to Donna Bain. Her father was on a trip a year or two before, and she reached out to me and said, "Hey, could you do me a favor? I need a little help coordinating this." And I said, "Yeah, sure." Actually, my Susan was in Iraq at the time doing a deployment. So we were able to bring all of the guys over, Bill and Don and Buck and Rod and Frank Bracani, and the actors came over, Richard, Michael, and Frank James. And so it was an amazing 6 days or so to spend time with this unit that was getting ready to ship back out to Iraq. One of the interesting and one of the really cool things was my wife, who was in Iraq at the time, needed to be in launch duel. So we were able to pick her up. She was able to time her time in launch duel while we were there. Wow. So I wasn't, I hadn't seen her a little bit. And so it was really, really neat for her to join us. She spent like 4 or 5 days with us. And so that was really, really cool. And the other thing that was really amazing was walking through launch duel on this particular day with Bill, and him going into the rooms and talking with these young soldiers that just came off the battlefield. And there's one in particular who was an amputee, and Bill just went in there and just talked with the guy and just said, "Hey kid, you're gonna be okay, look at me." And wow. That was a pretty cool moment. And then you know, Buck Compton, you know, my dad and Buck had such a great relationship. You know, I wasn't Luz, but I was Luz's kid. So when my dad died and I reconnected, you know, with all these guys, I reconnected with Buck as well. And he was just a terrific, terrific guy. This next clip is Buck talking about Breakhorn Manor. And there's quite a bit of, well, a certain amount of humor in each and every one of these, but there's certainly some humor in this one as well.
A guy by the name of McMillan was from B Company, a lieutenant was laying on the side of the road, he had a broken leg, and he had one of these Thompson submachine guns. And I said, "Look," I said, "I haven't got a weapon. You're better off without one. The Germans get you, that used to shoot you, and the medics get you, you won't need it." I said, "Let me have your gun." So give me a gun. Then I had a chance to shoot it all night. And the first time I had a chance to shoot it, I was going to do one of these Jimmy Cagney things. There were movies that ejected live rounds that had a broken firing. The three guys that are here in the front row, with our collective memories, were able to figure out that we were all on the same plane together. That's not easy to do. But anyway, we got Sergeant Bill Garnier, Sergeant Don Malarkey, and Corporal Joe Toye. We're all on the same plane, so which one of you guys want to go first? Malarkey is the more articulate.
Oh man, he was something. So I think we're blocking Neil's picture here, but so this is Buck's 90th birthday. His wonderful daughter Tracy and other daughter Cindy and Tracy's husband Tim put together an amazing birthday party for him. I told Tracy, I said, "Don't tell your dad I'm coming, and we'll make it a surprise." So I arrived at the birthday party, which was at an airplane hangar, and I stood about 15 feet away from where he was sitting as people were coming by, kind of a receiving line. And I just said, "I'll just stand here until he looks up at me." And there was a little break in the line. He looked up and he smiled. And you know, that's why I flew all that way, was to see that smile on his face. So, but it was an amazing party. Tracy has a friend that has a jet, as we all do. And the guy said, "Is there anything I can do?" And she said, "You know, there is. Could you fly to Los Angeles and pick up a few friends of mine?" So the guy flew down to Los Angeles, picked up a bunch of the actors, including Neil and his wife, and Richard and James, and I think Michael Cutlets, and maybe one or two others. And it was a fantastic fantastic party. And then on Sunday, I was leaving and I went to Tracy's home and hung out with them, late breakfast. And I said goodbye to Buck. And 6 weeks later, about he passed away. So, so it was worth that trip to see him one last time in person. So it was great. Now this is just an amazing story right here. This is Don and Fritz. And you could kind of see me in the background over there. This was back on that morale tour, and I really didn't know any of this was going on. But anyway, so I can't remember who took this picture, but the picture to the right I had taken myself, and so they met several years before this picture. I think Don was on a tour and Fritz was on a tour. So Fritz was a German soldier. Don was a U.S. soldier. During the Battle of the Bulge, they said they were within 3 kilometers of each other. And they began this friendship just before this picture, that saved each other's lives by kind of dissolving the 60 years of war shame that had pushed the men both to the brink of a tough spot. And what they found was reconciliation, common ground, and a peace that eluded both of them since the war. We can only imagine what war is like for us. For me, I've never served, but if you're shooting and killing and observing all of this kind of stuff. So, it's an amazing thing, and their legacy will live on through their daughters, Marianne and her husband Dan, and the 2 boys, Volker and Matthias, and their wives, in 3 ways: peace, family, and forgiveness. And the book will be out in 2021, and it's called Saving My Enemy. So it's a great, great story. I've met Matthias and Volker and their families back in Portland several years ago. And they're part of the Easy Company family.
Yeah, well, and we'll have Marianne on at some point talking about that book, and she said she'd come on the History Hack as well and talk about it. So, yeah, amazing. These are the kind of the side shoot projects that have come out of this Band of Brothers phenomenon, and an ability for 2 families to have some sense of healing just because of being able to meet up. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah. No, I want to point out, if I can pick in a little bit, that Malarkey had a great sense of humor, even back during the war. Because there's a little anecdote that crosses my mind right now. It was during the Battle of the Bulge, right, almost right in the middle in the attack on Foix on 13 January 1945. Now, Malarkey went to the University of Oregon together with a guy named Eugene Brown. Now, Brown would later outrank Malarkey in the army, but they kind of joined together. Brown was going to be an officer, and at one point, still in training, after the training hours, they ran into each other again, after they joined the army. And Malarkey was like, hello, Gene, hello, Gene. Yeah, Brown was actually already made it to 2nd lieutenant and stuff. He was his fellow officers and some NCOs, and he kind of ignores Malarkey like he didn't see him. So a couple of days later, they ran into each other again of kind of a similar situation. Malarkey was like, hello, Gene, hello, Gene. And Brown walks up to him and says, Malarkey, can I talk to you for a second? He says, listen, I'm here with other officers, you're a private, I'm an officer. I got to think of my reputation. I'm working my way up the ladder. So the next time you see me, I would like to be addressed with my rank and my name. You got it, Malarkey. So Don goes, oh, yeah, got it. So months later, now during the battle in Foix, Malarkey is like coming down the field with his men as part of a 2nd platoon, and Captain Gene Brown was sent down in there by Colonel Sink to give him a status update. And Brown busts out of the house, dodging bullets, diving behind a hedgerow, and across the field, he sees like this guy from Oregon he knew so well, still dodging bullets. He goes like, "Malarkey, is that you?" And Malarkey sticks up his head in the middle of the fight, goes, "Hello, Gene." Yeah. I mean, funny.
Wow. And the other malarkey story about Oregon, the university, is his frat house was the one used in Animal House, wasn't it? Did you know that? Malarkey's actual frat building was the one they filmed Animal House at in 1978. So John Belushi and all those guys there and Tim Matheson, they were hanging about in the building where Malarkey had been at college himself 30 years earlier. So I like to think there's a little bit of Malarkey's mischievousness that kind of was left in the building there. And John Landis, the director of Animal House, used a bit of it in the movie there, because I can't now watch Animal House without seeing in the back of my mind's eye, I can see Don Malarkey in the background now. So that's another bit of interesting trivia there for you. But anyway, did you not know that, George?
No, I didn't know that one. I didn't know that one. That's a great one.
Yeah, that was his frat house. Don Malarkey's frat house was Delta House in Animal House.
Yeah,
fantastic stuff.
That is a riot. That's a riot. So.
Right.
And then Ed Tipper. Ed was just an amazing guy. I was able to kind of get to know him more in the last 15 years, I guess, of his life. And amazing guy. My mom and dad, when I got older, when they were going to the reunions, we would have a pre and a post conversation about the reunions. Who was going to be there and all those kinds of little details. And then when they got back, they would tell us, they would tell me or my sister the stories. And this one year they got back and they said, "You're not going to believe it, but Ed met this beautiful doctor from Costa Rica and is getting married." Now, mind you, Ed is 60 years old and he's been a bachelor his whole life. And so they were razzing him a little bit because, he used to travel the world and, he was a bachelor, but he met Rosie and they fell in love. And so the following year they came back and they said, "You're not going to believe it. Rosie's going to have a baby." So at 61 years old, he had a little baby. And so anyway, it was an amazing story. He was a great, great guy. His daughter's name is Kerry. And, he skied up until his mid-80s. I remember we were talking, he bought a new car at like 90 years old in the Honda, which, those things are bulletproof, they'll last forever. So the salesman was trying to sell him an extended warranty on it. And he said, "Do I look like I'm going to need an extended warranty?" So, but he was just a special guy, and he could relate to guys, regular guys like me. He was as smart as a whip. He was a teacher, and he did a lot of things. So I was just blessed to know him as well. He was a Bronco fan. We used to talk about Broncos all the time, which is football, American football. So
yeah,
but
we know, we understand. And
yeah,
that's Erica and Elizabeth Makos there, who we had Adam Makos on a show last week. Well, that's two others of the Makos family there. So a wonderful family. Boy, I'll tell you that Adam is a terrific writer, isn't he? He is. Yeah. No, he's had some great stories to write, but he's told them with absolute flair. I'm privileged to be a friend of his, and Reg is highly regarded by them as well at Valor. We're part of the Valor Club, I suppose. But yeah, amazing stuff. And I was going to tell a story about Ed Tipper then, but I think it's a bit too rude. I'll try and tell a slightly clean version of it. I was in the Arches, the Pastor Republic in Carrington a few years ago, and I think it was Paul Rogers. It was Paul Rogers and Earl McClung were there, and this is on Chris Anderson's third platoon tour when he brought over Rogers, McClung. Forrest Guth was supposed to come, but he couldn't because Harriet had passed away, and then Shifty couldn't come because he was ill or something. And they were talking about the other third platoon guys who couldn't have come on the tour. And Paul Rogers and Earl McClung said, well, the thing is, Tipper would be here, but he's still having sex that we aren't our age. And it was a reference to Ed's wife being considerably younger. So, he won't be coming to Europe. He's back in Colorado having lots of sex. We said, "Oh, okay, fine, good. Yes, move along. So yeah, that's my little recollection of Ed then. Paddy's watching from Ireland, who got on very well with Ed, because Ed went to Ireland however many years ago it was to kind of retrace his Irish ancestry, and Pat helped him out with that. But yeah,
he was a great guy. He
was a lovely guy, Tipper, really extraordinary.
And then here's the scene there that was depicted in Carrington, and Bart. I don't know how to pronounce Bart's last name.
Foley.
Yeah, Bart and Liebgott. And one of the interesting things about that, I remember Ed telling me the story that when he got back home after surviving, got back home, a lot of guys didn't think he made it, and he went and visited a friend from the unit. And the letter got back and said to the soldier, and said, Ed Tipper came by and wanted you to say hello. And the guy said, Ed Tipper, he didn't survive. He's dead. So it kind of went back and forth as far as they didn't believe that he had survived, but he did in fact survive. And when he did pass away, they had a celebration for life, and his daughter Carrie said, "Can you come out?" And I said, "Sure." So at the services, and I was able to pay a visit to his grave, and at the services, she just wondered if I could say a little something about her dad. And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I had just a couple minutes of a little prepared thing. And then I said, I've got one other note. I reached out to a friend of Ed's, and he wouldn't be able to be here, but he wanted to share this. So here it is. To the Tipper family, the loss of your patron, hero, father, brother, and grandpa makes us bow to the vagaries of relentless time, as we all must. But like some of America who took note of what Ed did, along with those special others, the one-time boys and grown old men of Easy Company, his moving on is accompanied with admiration and gratitude. The world needed saving, and Ed Tipper saved it. The Tipper family needed raising, and Ed Tipper raised you. Brave men do such things. Not that Ed ever saw himself as anything more than a man doing his job in both eras, over time and at home. You have my sincere condolences for your loss and all the prayers I can offer. Signed, Tom Hanks. So that Tom, he was a sweet guy. Anytime any of the guys needed him, he was there for them. So.
Yeah, I knew you were going to do that mic drop moment there, and that was the people listening, I think, are impressed with the names you're dropping. Well, there's Susan's dad. There's the devilishly handsome Robert Burr Smith.
Yes. I hope Susan is watching. Is she still watching?
I'm sure she'll join in again on YouTube now. Her dad's there. Okay,
cool. Hey, Burr Smith, Southern California kid, good looking, well educated, well read. Actually, Burr was slated to be on Lieutenant Meehan's plane.
Yeah.
But was pulled off last minute by Winters, naturally saving his life. And, after the war, he got married, had 3 kids, settled in the Bay Area, and his wife always thought he had a death wish. He stayed in the Army Reserve, Special Forces, became a Green Beret, and then recruited by the CIA to be a paramilitary specialist in the secret war in Laos. He was there for 7 years. His daughter also visited him twice and shared this letter, which is a pretty tough letter. Well, it's a great letter. It's tough to read. My life, my income, and therefore your security are all directly related to violence. I would not have this job nor be away from home so much if there was not so much hate and violence in the world. It is odd and sometimes deeply disturbing to realize that my livelihood is gained from the most basic weakness of mankind, his inability to live in peace with his neighbors. Someday there may be no need for my kind of person, the experts in violence, and the world will be a better place when that day comes. I will be the first to shout welcome to that happy time, but in the meantime, there are tigers in the jungle and the defenseless must be defended, which means killing tigers. I hope you understand, baby. I'm not really a war lover or a man of violence. It's just that I have been trained for many years in the skills in warfare and am needed to help other people defend themselves because they are not trained in these terrible skills. Whew.
Wow.
That's a tough letter.
Wow.
So, but, oh yeah, one last thing. He had a remarkable career. You know, he served this country beginning in 1942 and ended around 1980. He died on January 7th, 1983 at 58 years old of cancer.
Wow.
And then there's my Susan. She's the reason I can kind of do all this stuff. You know, she's the superstar of the family. I shouldn't have to read this, but I will just to make sure I don't miss anything. So anyway, she's retired colonel, 27 years in the United States Army Reserve, Combat Support Hospital. Her final tour was Operation Iraqi Freedom. She did many humanitarian missions in South America and Central America. When she graduated college, she wanted to go to Vietnam, but her dad said no, because he had seen the horrors of war, because he was in World War II. She joined the Peace Corps, and she went to the jungles of Brazil, where when that was over, she went on the ship Hope. It's called Project Hope now. At 33, she joined the military, and the little town we live in, there was a couple named Lloyd and Barbara Colvin who like to recognize people who have gone above and beyond, and dedicated this bench in her honor. And so it's pretty cool to have that. And this is in the community that we live in. So, and there's actually a little picture of me there too. I made it. I don't know if you can see that. That's me in that bottom corner. You know?
In the corner, yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I made it in there. But anyway, she's got the remarkable career. She's the superstar of the family.
So George, you know, you're the only person that I know that when the wife tells you go take out the garbage, and you can tell her like, "Yes, Colonel," you're the only one who gets away with that. The only one I know. But
so anyway, you know, here's Babe and Robin, who played Babe, and you know, did such a great job. And Babe was such a great guy. He was very, very thoughtful. He never forgot about the men who didn't come home. And that was one of the things when you talk to him in December, January, you could kind of hear it in his voice, reminiscing about, you know, his buddies, whether it's Julian or the Campbell. I'm not sure when Campbell passed away or was killed, but you know, that he was an amazing guy. And I had a lot of fun with Babe. We had a lot of laughs, and he was just a great guy. And I missed the heck out of our phone calls on Sunday night. So it was funny. I used to call him on Sunday night and we would talk. And then, you know, when he was done with you, he would say, "So is there anything I can do for you?" That meant you were done. So, but anyway, but yeah, he was a special guy. And then
I think Reg and we might want to share some Babe stories later on.
Oh, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
We'll carry on. We're in the middle of your bit right now.
No, you could do the Babe, because that's the last slide of Babe.
Oh well, okay. Well, we'll trade some Babe stories. So hang on, you might as well finish off your. Have you got some more slides to go, George, or not?
Oh yeah, I got several more. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do your slides and we'll come back and talk some Babe stories later on.
Okay. All right. So hey, so this is I'm not sure what reunion this was. This could have been the 65 reunion again. I'm not sure, but you know, you can see you got Maynard top left, Red right, Buck. Let's see. I think that's Buck. Ed Tipper to the right, Carl Finch to make, and the guy in the middle is Mike Rainey.
Yeah, of course, Mike, isn't it? And it's Perko on the right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so anyway, and you know, Mike Rainey, he's the one that came up with the story that Winters had said, you know, Grandpa, were you a hero in the war? And no, but I served in a company of heroes. So that was the guy that coined that phrase. So, and then Shifty, he was such a great guy. You know, you guys have met Shifty, and
yeah, you
know how sweet he was. And the story I always remember about Shifty was at one of the reunions, I think it was in Atlanta, Earl came up to me and said, look, George, I want to pass the mantle, the torch to you. From here on in, it's going to be your responsibility. When Shifty gets to the door at the reunion, you need to be there to hand him his drink. So I said, oh man, that's cool. So anyway, so that was early in the morning, and I figured out, okay, his son Wayne was going to bring him in, and Margot. And it's like, okay, so they're going to be driving in sometime in the afternoon. So all afternoon, I just sat in the lobby with his drink, with just a screwdriver. And when he came in, I handed it to him, and I think he got as big of a rise out of it as I did. So it was really neat. And so I can continue to do that for several more years until he passed away. And then the very next year at the Fort Campbell, Kentucky reunion, I can't remember which year it was, I did the same thing to Earl, who had done that to me. So, but anyway, these were special people, and I was blessed to kind of be around them and have these little tasks that were meaningless to other people, but to me, they were pretty special stuff. And then, and it's a great shot. Here's my dad. You know, people always say to me, why do you wear sunglasses inside? And it's like, I'm not really sure. But when I saw this picture, I said, hey, look at my dad. He's got sunglasses on. So it's my dad, Frank, Walter Gordon, and Gordy Carson. And this clip here is Frank telling the story about when he landed in Normandy and they were at an area where they were all congregating. And he just tells a story about the radio. The cool thing is hearing Frank tell you in person, but I think our folks will enjoy it as well.
I got the radio out and everything, got my rifle assembled on it, and we started moving out, and we did some 82nd where a group of fellows, you know. And I remember there was Burgess in this group, and this officer sent Burgess out as a scout, and that's when Burgess got shot, you know. So I got this goddamn radio out. You know, my friend Love there, he lost his leg tag and he had the batteries. So I had the radio, no batteries. I got this goddamn radio, and I was my out there, like I was receiving all the time. I was there for 2 days.
Oh God. So anyway, yes, Frank, he was going nowhere on that one. He was there. So anyway, and having him tell you that story on the phone, that was just amazing. So wow. Anyway, I think I got 5 more to go. All right, so that's Frank. And then, okay, 2 of the 3 remaining guys, Bill Wingett to the left. Actually, Bill Wingett, it'll be his birthday, I think Friday. He'll be 98 years old. And I talked to Bill recently, and Mr. Freeman, great guy. He was on a tour, I think, last year. Just an amazing guy. I talked to him every once in a while.
He was supposed to be on a tour this year. His tour was only cancelled because of COVID. Brad's still in good health, but he was supposed to be here. I think it was early September, I think, with Eric Gore from the Gettysburg Museum.
Amazing guy. Just an amazing guy. Colonel Sink, and, you know, Dale Dyke did a great job with Colonel Sink. And this is I think this is the Fort Campbell reunion in '65. Colonel Sink passed away December 13th of 1965. So that's my dad to the left and Colonel Sink right in the middle there. So, and then here's my dad. And this is the last, almost the last slide, in a sense. But this is my dad talking about what being in this unit meant to him. And he was being very, very serious. But everybody thought he was joking, but he was being very serious. So if you listen real close, you can kind of hear how he was kind of choking it back just a little bit. And there's a pause in there someplace. We needed to shorten the pause. But anyway, so here it is. It's kind of brief.
And this is my dear wife is no reflection of a marriage. I heard this e-company August 1942. I left it in December of 1945. Those were the best 3 years of my life.
Yeah, and that was the defining moment in my, you know, the time he spent with those guys were it. You know, not that he just relived it every day, but that really shaped him for who he ended up being. So, but that's a great one, yeah. So, but Paul, I just want to say, Paul and Reg, there's many reasons why this came together tonight. And, you know, our mutual friend, Paul Clifford, thought it was a nice idea. And I'm happy he thought that much of the presentation to suggest to you to share these stories with your friends and supporters, of which I am one too.
Was that your last slide?
It was.
So then we'll go back to so we can see all of our lovely faces again. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Oh no, I have one more slide.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was I pressed it too early then. Okay, well, do your last slide then. Sorry.
All right. Do you go back to it?
I pressed stop. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. No worries. All right. Let's see. So anyway, yeah, Paul, I'm certainly a big fan of yours as well, and I admire your passion for passion for history and your ability to tell stories, and the same along with you too, Reg, and of the great men that served during World War II. You know, both of you guys have got a passion, and anytime somebody's in Normandy, it's you, Paul, and anytime somebody is in Bastogne, Reg, it's you that I suggest. So
thank you very much, George.
Thank you, George.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And anyway, I just wanted to read engraved. Let's see. Let's do this. Gotta go that way. Hang on just a second.
No worries.
New share. Let's see. That one. Let's do this one. Okay. You are screening, Sharon. Let's try a new share. I did that one. Let's see if this one does it. There we go. I knew we could do it. Okay. Engraved at the American Cemetery in Normandy, France are the words, "Our debt to the heroic men and valiant women in the service of our country can never be repaid. They have earned our undying gratitude. America will never forget their sacrifices." President Harry S. Truman. For those men and women who have served and who are currently serving, and for the heroes who lie beneath these crosses, this is why I do this. So thank you very much, you guys. I'm glad, and I hope your guests enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed giving it to you.
Well, we certainly have, and people, the comments coming in, people have been enjoying it. Should we do some chat, Ray? Do you want to tell some stories? I want to. Let's tell some stories. Should we tell some stories? Yeah, let's tell some stories. So the first thing I want to pick, I'll go first, is when you were saying a bit that last clip you played of your father, George, and you said that, you know, he was trying to be serious, but they were thinking he was being funny. I remember you saying that to me years ago, maybe the first or second time we met, and you were saying that your dad, being the clown, almost became a bit of a burden on him, because at some point he wanted to be serious, and they'd kind of expect you to end in a punchline. He would go, no, I'm being serious now, and that kind of started the war, didn't it? You know, because I think you said something on the lines of, when things were bad and your dad showed things were bad, people really got worried. So your dad had to be the one to kind of make the first crack and move on. Is that right? Yeah,
he was the joker of the group, and that was his mechanism to deal with the stress of war. Let's face it, they all had their hands full.
Yeah, George, like on what we do best on tour, one of the questions I often get is, hey, Rich, you know, well, with Luz in training in England, and the whole thing with impersonating Major Horton, is that a true story? Well, George, I know the answer by now because you told me, but can you share if that's a true story or not?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And
with Sobel?
It is. It is. And I talked with, I met Michael Sobel in 2003. He came to the Phoenix reunion. Billy Martin, Jim Martin, Johnny Martin's son put together a great reunion, and Michael was there. And when he came in, I recognized him. I don't know how, but I recognized him. I brought him over to the guys, and after we had a chance to chat, and I said to him, I can't believe that your father didn't turn over heaven and earth to find out who was the one that imitated Major Horton. So you would have thought that he would have. I would have thought, right? But I guess he was busy doing other things. But yeah, that was one of the stories, I heard as a kid a lot. So that was a good one there. Wow. And then Rick did such a great job portraying it in the series too. Yeah,
and for those who don't know, Rick is an incredible impressionist as well. I was sitting in a bar in Carenton with him, and he was switching from Joe Pesci to Bob De Niro to Al Pacino. And then he was doing his mates. He was doing the other actors sitting there. He was doing their voices. And I think he started doing Philip Barantini. And Phil has a strong Liverpool Scouse accent. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm hearing Phil in stereo, because there's the real Phil speaking in his Liverpool. And then there's Rick doing Phil on my right. And so that was an incredible bit of casting there. So great stuff. So Reg, what stories did you think of when you watched that? Had you seen that presentation before, by the way, Reg?
Well, actually, George showed bits of it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
When he was on a tour with Ambrose and we had a dinner meeting, and he said, Reg, would you like to join me to my room, because I want to show you something? And I was like, but of course he was talking about the presentation he was working on, so we didn't have much time, but he did show me some fresh. So I have heard a few of the audio bits, but I never saw the whole presentation as I saw it today. So, but a lot of familiar faces, I can tell you that.
Yeah. And
it brings back a lot of memories, just watching photos of these guys like Buck Compton, especially Burr Smith, Bill Garnier, Babe Heffron, because now that brings me up to one of the last times that Babe and Bill were in Besttown together on their final, because the last trip was just Babe. The last time when they were together, they had like a big tour, and they every time when they came back, they used to set up their command post at the Nuts Bar in downtown Besttown. That was their home base. And it was in that evening, everybody was sitting outside, and the guys were enjoying some Belgian beers, when like a pretty nervous looking blonde girl seemed to be walking by the terrace back and forward. So, and she kept staring at these veterans. So obviously she was like a huge Band of Brothers fan. So we got up and talked to the lady. He said, like, would you like to meet the veterans? Because I think that these are the people you're looking for. And she was like, oh, can I? So I said, of course, I don't own these people. So we invited her to the table. And she had a really great time with the boys, talking, taking photos and stuff. But before she left, she asked them, like, she asked Bill and Babe, like, would you please do me a favor? Would you mind signing something for me? So these guys were, sure, bring it on, whatever. And this is a true story. She opens her purse and she pulls out a white bra. And she puts it on a table and she asks for a marker. And I could see like Bill was looking at Babe. And Babe was looking at me, and I was like, I don't know. So Garnier grabs the bra and started to write on the left boob, like, Wild Bill Garnier, South Philadelphia Band of Brothers, and he signed it. And then he pushed the bra over to Babe, and he took the marker and he wrote on the right boob, just like, wish I was here, Babe. And I don't think that bra was ever washed again, and I don't know what happened with it or where the lady went to, but it was a classic. It was a classic story, but so typical Babe Heffron.
Yeah.
I now want to know why she had a bra in her purse.
She brought it. She must have brought it on purpose, hoping to see the guys and have it signed by them. So,
yeah, that's.
I can't remember seeing her going to the toilet like, okay, I don't have any paper on me. Let's just take the bra.
I'll use my bra. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. No. I mean, most of my Bill Garnier and Babe stories are too rude. But there's one photo. I was looking at some photos. I was looking at some memories, and the tour you mentioned there, Reg, when Babe did on his own. Of course, it was after Bill had his heart attack and couldn't travel. When Babe very gamely came over on his own, he brought Trish, his daughter, with him to kind of be his wingman. And I remember the fact is, and George will laugh at this, is that, of course, most of Babe's stories he couldn't tell because his daughter was there. And he'd be going, oh no, I can't tell that one. So, let me tell you about the time. Oh, no, I can't tell you that one. And his style was somewhat cramped by the fact he couldn't tell the stories. But obviously I saw him in Normandy, and he went on to Eindhoven, and he went to Bastogne. I'm sure he had a much better time in Eindhoven and Bastogne. His problem being in Normandy was he wasn't in Normandy in 1944. So he was trying to do the Bill Garnier roadshow on his own, and Babe was feeling a bit uncomfortable without Bill, and we're talking about a campaign he didn't fight in, and it was and he was getting him to tell stories was a bit like getting blood out of a stone, Frank. And he was a bit grumpy, as George. Babe could be a little bit, I mean, playfully grumpy, but grumpy nonetheless. And there's a photo. This is him at Angerville. I got a couple of. This is him at Angerville Plan with me, and then just after that photo, he stuck his fingers up, and he knew what he was doing. He knew that it was definitely the English way of doing it. The church, it wasn't the Churchill, it was the other way. But this next photo is the one I'm gonna. We're on Utah Beach, and finally he opened up, and it was when these group of Royal Marines turned up. And Normandy is somewhere the Royal Marines. They're not Royal Marines yet. They haven't got their green berets. They come over we see them once or twice a year. These guys, so they're in their kind of last few weeks of training, and. I love Babe's pose there. He's doing that. Yeah, I mean, it's just so. Anyone who knew Babe, that is Babe in a nutshell. That photo of him there. Look at the pride he has of being a legend. They thought it was amazing. These young Marines sitting with a hero, and suddenly he started telling them stories. I remember him. I was trying to listen to a story, and he said, "No, these stories aren't for you. They're for proper combat guys." And I was like, "Oh, shit." So I had to walk off. He made me go, yeah, I'll see you later. And I had to walk off and let him tell these Royal Marines proper stories of combat. So, there you go. But you must have other Babe stories, George. I mean,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've been, let's see, looking through my archives here, and there you go.
Oh, there it is.
Wow.
That's a riot.
Wow.
It's a riot. Yeah, he was a trip.
Yeah, by the way, anyone watching, if you've got any questions you want to ask George or Reg or me, because we did spend time with the veterans in the battlefields, and George has been meeting them for years and years. I mean, we've been asked if anyone has any photos of John Julian, and I've never found one of him during the war. I remember asking Babe that years ago, and he hadn't got any photos of Julian in the war. I don't think he's even in the big company shot, is he? I don't think. I think he was replacement after the Benning shot. But anyway, I'll just see if I've got any other photos that will make people laugh. I don't know. I'll share a couple of things of my memory just because it's my turn now. So. This is me and Buck Compton in Record Man. I was a bit bigger then. I've lost a bit of weight since then. I don't know what the year that was. That was on one of Chris Anderson's tours. And Buck was typically more interested in talking about the horses in the field than he actually was the battle. And then a bit later on the same day, that's with Malarkey in the yard of Record Manor. Then he always had his pass. I remember telling Don all the time, you shouldn't have your passport like that. I mean, so no one's going to steal it off me. But that's how he always, and pens and a passport and his airline ticket. He kept everything with him, even though he's been in Europe for about 15 days. He had his whole travel documents with him there. And I think else I'll show you. Some of the most poignant stuff is being with the veterans when they when they are at the graves of those who didn't make it. And this is a photo of Paul Rogers applying the sand to Salty Harris's grave at the Normandy Cemetery. And then just after this, he stood there and told us all a few words about how sad it was that Salty had not died with the company. He had died, you know, because he was booted out, as all of those watching know, because of the Sobel mutiny, and he was booted out into Pathfinders, and he died in Normandy on June the 13th in Carenton, but he died with people he hadn't been with for more than a few weeks. And Paul was saying how what a shame it was, if you were going to die, you should die with your buddies, and that was Paul's biggest regret there. What else? A photo? I'll let Reg take over. This is Forrest at the monument to the Meehan crash site in Burzaville-au-Plan, but Forrest had been past the wreckage of the aircraft, and there's a famous photo that isn't of the Chalk 66. Forrest had a camera with him, and he ended up walking past two crashed C-47s that day. The first one, the one where Thomas Meehan and his other buddies had died, Forrest looked at the crash remains but didn't take a photo. But he did take a photo later on of another C-47, a 501st one that came down near what's now called Dead Man's Corner. And that's the one that often gets published in the books as being Meehan's aircraft, and it's not. But Forrest had been past these guys. And I remember just after this photo was taken, I've got another one as well, I think. Oh, that's him at Breckle. Now I'll go back to the previous one. Just after we took this photo, this is when Larry Alexander was over, and Larry was writing his book In the Footsteps of Easy Company.
Can I get in the camera?
Forrest cried because Forrest had said how sad it was when he'd been past that crash. He didn't know that he was walking through the ashes of friends of his, because there was burning material in the field, and he and I think it was Tab Talbot had were walking through that field. And they were Forrest was saying, we must have had our friends on our boots. We must have had bits and pieces of our friends' remains on our boots. And we had no idea. We were just sort of tourists. We just saw a crashed aircraft and thought it was interesting. And years later, he found out that his buddies had been killed in it. So he got very emotional there. And I'm sure Reg has got moving stories with Forrest up in Bastogne as well, because I handed it over to who did Forrest tour the Ardennes Eindhoven with? Was it?
Well, I did. Larry and Forrest, we hooked up with me in for the Bastogne part, so okay. I can't remember who did the Eindhoven.
Were they with Steph in Eindhoven? I can't remember.
Yeah, with Steph. Yeah. That's Steph Leenhaus. That's possible. Yes.
Yeah.
Probably, but at that time when Forrest was on his last trip in Bastogne, I think it must have been 2008, around that time.
2008. Yeah.
Yeah. Harriet had passed away, and I think Forrest took a fall in Normandy, so he had his arm in a sling. But I remember that us sitting somewhere at a restaurant in the evening, on the first evening, having dinner with some friends of Forrest, and we're eating, and suddenly like this Spanish-looking guitar player shows up at the table and starts playing songs. But we were talking, so we couldn't hear much of the talk, because of the music. So after he finished the song, he asked if we had any requests. So Forrest goes like, "Can you play Far Away?" And the guy goes like, "I do not know that song." He says, "Play Far Away," he said. So, no, that cracked me up. He was the kind of guy, like in 1944 when the guys were dug in Bastogne, out in the woods, especially to the front line or the main line of the fence. I mean, actually the first line, you were not allowed to build any fire, make any light. The enemy would see it, drop some mortar shells on your platoon. But I remember a story about Lieutenant Ed Shames coming back from a meeting in the evening, and out of the lines of 3rd Platoon, he sees some beams of light shining out of a foxhole, like standing out like a candle in a dark room. So he runs to the hole and he kicks the branches away, and in there was Forrest Guth. Now, earlier that day, Forrest had found like a destroyed German, like half-track, and he had taken the light and the battery from us. So now he was there comfortably in his foxhole, click with the light on, reading a booklet. So Shames actually reprimands him like put it out, But there's always stories like that with Forrest, especially when you talk about it. That's what he got most famous for, the extra pouch, just like reinforcing his jumpsuit, remodeling his M1 Garand from semi-automatic into almost full automatic. So he was an amazing guy.
Mm. And it was just good, going back to George's excellent presentation, to hear their voices when they were that much younger, because there's people watching this today. I think Chris Shaw is watching, others, who sadly only got to meet some of these veterans in their very last 2 or 3 years, which was still extraordinary. But of course, they were already starting to slow down. And hearing them back, 43, that was 92. So they were late 60s, early 70s then, George. So they were only 15 years older than I am now, and hearing how vibrant and young they sound then, and Dick Winters still sounding like he could command men in combat, and of course when post series they'd aged another 10 years, and the last time Malarkey was here, he was really in pretty bad shape, so it's a privilege to back and hear them in their youth. And we got a question from Chris saying about Forrest carving did he carve wooden birds later in his life? And he did. And one of my favorite stories just came into my head. And for anyone who knows Forrest, Beth, Nigel, I hope I'm not remembering this incorrectly, but when Forrest was a teacher, and he was a teacher for a long, long time, he was woodwork and metal shop. And I didn't get these stories from Forrest. I got them from Harriet, his wife. Harriet told the best stories about Forrest, because Forrest, like all the guys, was always very humble, and I didn't do much. And his school in Pennsylvania, the first thing is they had their first child come to school in a wheelchair, and the county didn't have enough money to put the wheelchair ramps in. So Forrest, during his summer break from the school, spent the entire summer putting the ramps into the school so that when term would start in September, the kid would come in. But the other story is about a kid that was was assigned to their school who was, I forget whether it was Asperger's, autistic. And this is in the early years when they had recently been diagnosed. And this kid was socially, as they are, socially kind of awkward. But the kid's doctors believed that if he was put in a mainstream school, he'd been going to a special school, he might actually thrive. And this kid was sent to the school, and the principal gives a speech to all the staff saying, we've got this kid coming in, so we're going to try and treat him normally, but at the same time keep an eye on this kid, make sure he's not being bullied, this, that, and the other. And by the way, Mr. Guth, the principal said, this kid's going nowhere near your metal shop and your wood shop, because we just can't let this kid anywhere near your chisels and lathes and drills and things that spin round at fast RPM. And so you won't be dealing with it. And this kid joins the school, and over the first sort of few weeks, none of the teachers were able to make this bond with this kid. The kid's still kind of a loner. The kids aren't making friends with him. The teachers don't know how to kind of break through to him. And Forrest just saw that was watching this kid at lunch break or something like that. And Forrest was looking at the way the kid was kind of, when he sat in a chair, he'd kind of feel the arms of his chair with his hands. He would feel the table. He's all about the sense of touch. And long story short, Forrest ended up taking this kid into his wood shop and showing him woods and materials and driftwood and tree bark. And this kid was getting a real kick out of feeling the different textures. And eventually, in the lunch break, Forrest would take this kid which had been specifically told not to do by the principal, and taught this kid how to use the lathe. And they turned up wooden birds, wrens and robins out of wood. And Forrest ended up with these bits of wood. I don't know why the kid didn't have them. Perhaps the kid had one or two of them, I don't know. But Forrest had these birds he'd made up with the kid. And the kid had the breakthrough. The kid, because of Forrest's connection with him, had a bit of a breakthrough. And Forrest told me, or Harriet told me, or Larry Alexander, someone told me that the kid was married with his own kids now. And he had this breakthrough at school, and it was because of Forrest taking the time with him. And I think when I remember when Forrest was with Larry Alexander in Normandy, and we asked him questions, and Larry was trying to do his book, Forrest would always consider every answer very carefully before responding. He'd kind of really think, this is really important. He'd go, again, yeah, people like Bill Garnier, they'd throw a wisecrack first, and then you'd have to kind of get a real serious answer. But Forrest would consider everything like it was very important, and he'd try and give you the best of his recollections, even if he didn't remember the thing very well. But that's one of my Forrest stories. But I'll shut up and let you tell a story now. Reg, tell us a Forrest story. Another one. You must have one.
Well, there's so many, Paul. There's just matters how much time you have.
Yeah, well, we'll do another 20 minutes or something.
But there's like one of the photos I always love seeing are the ones, George, in your presentation of Burr Smith.
Mm.
You know, you pointed out to his long career, actually, even after World War II, Special Forces, CIA. And there's this little story I once heard, but I never got it officially confirmed. But if you remember watching the series, that one patrol into Noonan in the Operation Market Garden, escorted with the Cromwell tanks.
Yep.
We have Lieutenant Brewer, who actually stands up in the open road, like looking into the town, and everybody's like, what's he doing? And then he gets hit. So that's when Al Mampre runs out there, tries to give him first aid, and then Al gets hit. So then hell kind of breaks loose there, and for a long time, people thought Brewer had died, from his wounds, which in fact wasn't. But when they were evacuating him, apparently and probably assuming that he was dead, someone took his wristwatch, and I was told that was Burr Smith, to keep it or maybe to send it to his family.
Mm.
And but for some reason, it never did go back to his family. But then many years after the war, while working for the CIA, to his surprise, Burr Smith ran into Brewer again at a meeting about layoffs. Like, what you doing here? Like, well, what are you doing here? And that's when he officially kind of returned the wristwatch to Lieutenant Brewer.
Wow.
So yeah, that's one of the stories I was told. I heard the story from like different angles many years ago, but I never got it confirmed. But it's one of a great story about Burr Smith.
Susan just confirmed that's true, and yeah, wow.
Yeah. So, but I was fortunate because these are the guys that don't play like Burr doesn't play it's not one of the main characters in the episodes on Bastogne, but still he was, like you said, he was kind of George, like you say, he was kind of a daredevil made to be a soldier. Because I remember at one time in Bastogne, when they were still dug in at the Bois Jacques, he and Lipton, at that time, I think Lipton still the first sergeant were sent out across the open field over the hilltop between Foix and Recogne to make contact with I Company. So they had to cross 100, 200 yards open field. So when they started out through the snow, German observers saw them, and they started sending mortar rounds into the direction of the two guys. So that when the first rounds exploded, they went flat on their bellies. And while lying there, Lipton asks Burr, okay, what's the strategy here? Run in a straight line, short distance, or distracting and zigzag? What do you think? And Burr looked at him and he said, well, let's do both. So actually the guys got up, started running straight ahead, went down on their bellies again, got up, left, zigzag, down again. So the guy down there, the town, with his mortar was actually driven nuts, because these guys wouldn't stand still, at the time. And they safely made it up to the I Company lines. I can't remember for what reason they were sent as a runner down to contact possibly Lieutenant Tinsley on the other side of the main road. But that's one of the Burr Smith stories. He wasn't afraid. He'd rather joke with the German mortar guy.
Wow. My favorite Burr Smith story is one Susan told me, but it's about the letters Burr exchanged with Webster. And it's interesting that they weren't friends in the war at all. And Webster was, we all know, was a bit of he wasn't the most popular guy, because he was a bit different to some of the others. But he lightened up after war, Webster, and he and Burr became pretty friends. They were part of the California clique, weren't they, George? And Susan has all Webster's letters to her father. And there's one I remember, and he was remembering the war, and he's remembering the leave they had in London after Normandy. And there was a letter, and Susan was saying how wonderful Webster's turn of phrase was, because he was clearly a talented writer. And he was saying something about the lines of he woke up in a fountain in Trafalgar Square, and Randleman was drunk and had fallen kind of backwards into the fountain, but the top of his head was under the water, but his nose was, but he was kind of bubbling. He was conscious, but he was like snoring, breathing through the water, and they'd left this devastation there. And Webster said to Burr, "Do you remember what the newspapers say?" Now, this probably was just a joke. It probably didn't actually say it. So the newspaper said after our furlough in London, the English newspaper said, "Worst damage in London since the Blitz." And I have no idea whether that was, a real headline, but that was Susan telling. I hope Susan's watching it. I hope I haven't butchered the story there, but it was definitely Webster referring to the drunken chaos in London. And interestingly, for those who are fans of the show, of course, there was going to be, when it was going to be 13 parts, one of the parts they said was going to be about in between episodes 3 and 4, there was going to be a longer sequence where they were shenanigans and stuff in London, and you would get to know Babe and the other guys who joined, Miller and Hashi would join. But there's going to be much more of the escapades in England, and running around with girls, and that all ended up getting cut out. And what's the story, George, about your dad and the parachute silk in England? Isn't there one?
Oh, I don't have no idea about that one.
The one about where he was asked, there was a girl and he was asked to bring back parachute silk. Is that your dad? Or was that someone? If you don't remember, it can't be your dad. But I thought
No, was that Welch?
No, this is about someone in England. A girl they met in England who said, "Can you get us parachute silk?" And they got parachute silk, and whoever it was just turned up with some green and brown camouflage parachute silk. And the girl went, "No, we want white." And whoever it was didn't have any idea why this English girl wanted silk. And it was just to make underwear, not...
Oh.
was that not your dad? Obviously not.
I'm not sure, but...
Maybe someone else told it about your dad. Maybe that's it. Maybe Bill was telling that about your dad. I'm sure it was someone saying, yeah, poor George didn't know that he was supposed to bring white silk. And he bought the camouflage stuff and didn't understand this poor English girl getting him annoyed. But any other favorite stories you've got, George, from your years? I mean, your years of these guys. I mean, people who were. I mean, Paul Rogers. What's your recollection of Paul? Because he was an absolute gentleman of a guy, wasn't he?
Well, my last image of Paul was the first reunion that we had as the kids. I'm trying to think if it was 8 years ago when the men said, "Okay, folks, guys and girls, you got to take over. We're not going to carry the reunions, but we want you to carry on." So we did. And the very first reunion was in Lafayette, Louisiana. Scotty Gordon had put it together, did a wonderful job, and a bunch of us were there. And Paul and Shirley were able to attend. And I'll always remember the image. There was a lot of events going on in New Orleans, in Lafayette, New Orleans at the time, usually including alcohol and food. And so anyway, we were at a festival, and it was just full of entertainment and energy, and they had a cart. And I just remember them shuttling Paul and Shirley out, and he just had the biggest smile. He was just having such a great time with us kids and stuff. So that's my last image that I really remember of Paul, and how much joy was in his heart at that particular moment.
Yeah, he was a lovely guy. When he came back with Chris, and it was Al McClung, and Chris spent a lot of time with them in Saint-Marie Cleves, because that's where they had fought on D-Day. And it was really nice for them to get a chance to have their time in the spotlight. And obviously, it must have gone to Brecon Manor and what have you later on. But we spent a good few hours in Saint-Marie Cleves. We walked down the lane just as you go into Saint-Marie Cleves to the right. In fact, it's near the Henri Renault's house down the back. And it's been built over by the main road now. Was the area where Paul Rogers had been defending with elements of the 505th. And he and Earl were talking about their escapades with the 82nd, of course, where one of the alleged occasions where Earl McClung earned his nickname, which we all know that story. For those who don't know that story, there are various versions of how Earl got his nickname, but the version that Paul Rogers told me, well, told me and Chris Anders and the others, is that Earl McClung and Shifty were in St. Mary's a couple of days after D-Day. They're attached to the I Company 505th, and an 82nd officer comes over and he's looking for volunteers. There's a German armored car coming down the road or something, and says, "I need volunteers. Someone come down, help stop this armored car. Who's volunteering?" And while he was asleep, Earl McClung was volunteered by the others. The Rogers and Shifty or someone volunteered Earl McClung to join in. So Earl McClung woke up with a 30 caliber machine gun over his lap, with an 82nd Airborne officer shouting, "Well, come on then!" And Earl ran off, not knowing where he was going, with a machine gun. And they duly stopped the German armored car, and it was all done and dusted. And later on, they wrote a poem about that, about this escapade in St. Mary's, and during it, it was "Who pinned the gun on one lung McClung?" And that, because one lung was the scanning. He may have earned the nickname before, but that was a particular poem. And the story, I think, Joe Machia told me this at one of the last reunions when Paul Rogers and Earl were there, and they'd lost a couple of friends since the last one. Paul went over to Earl and said, "You know, you've been trying to find out for the last 72 years who it was who put the gun on you in St. Mary's." And Earl went, "Yeah, I wish I knew who the bastard was." And Paul went, "Well, it was me." I says, "I thought I'd better come clean." And it was me who did it. And he said, "We and Gordon thought that if we wrote the poem about it, we wouldn't be accused of the crime." We said, so we posed who did put the gun on one lung McClung, but it always was Rogers and McClung. So Rogers and Gordon Rogers who put it on McClung, but Rogers and Gordon made the poem. That's it. That's right. I think I've got a photo of Paul Rogers here in Normandy. Have I got one, or did I might have got rid of it. No, I can't find it now. Can't find my photo. But anyway, we ought to stop fairly. So we've been at it an hour and 45 minutes now, but time flies when you're having fun. Any more fun stories anyone wants to say before we bring it to an end?
Well, I do have a few more, but I can't tell them in mixed company.
That's the problem. So many of my best stories are really disgusting. The best Bill and Babe ones are just so rude, aren't they? And that's the problem. Yeah, for I don't want to blow my audience by using too many rude stories, because they were just hilarious. Those two, weren't they? I mean, and all of them were. And yeah, that's well, I'm trying to think of a clean Bill Garnett. Well, it's the one that. There's an art print. Valor Studio did an art print depicting Earl McClung landing in St. Mary's, and I helped determine the time to be on the church clock hands. And Prince Charles ended up with the original of this painting. I can't remember if it was a Larry Selman one, whoever. Anyway, the original got sent to London to Prince Charles, and Valor Studio's got a call from Prince Charles's people saying, "I say, we very much like this painting. Why don't you bring over a few of the veterans that we can have a little bit of a shindig here at the palace, and we can unveil it in front of the cameras. It'll be a jolly good show." And Valor Studios duly contacted Buck Compton, and he said he'd go on a trip to London. And I think Malarkey signed up. And one of the makers, I think it was Brian or maybe Adam, called up Bill Garnier in Philly and said, "Hey, Bill, hypothetically, Bill, if you got to London, you got to meet Prince Charles, and the conversation stilted, what would you say?" And Bill Garnier went, "Well, the first thing I'd say to that big-eared schmuck is, why the hell did he let that cute blonde girl go and end up with one who looks like a horse?" Now, everybody's thought it. Every male has looked at the late Princess Diana and the current Camilla and thought, that's... But that was Bill's, and the punchline of the story is Bill, of course, didn't get the invite to go. They decided not to take Bill to London for fear of a diplomatic incident, because knowing Bill, he would have said it. I mean, Bill, we all remember, I think he said to me once, "If I had any tact, son, it was blown out of my leg in the Ardennes." He said he didn't care. He would, if you thought you were being an idiot, he'd tell you you're being an idiot. If he thought a girl was attractive, he'd say it to the girl's face. He didn't pull his punches at all. And I think that's Bill would have ended up saying that to Prince Charles or to Camilla. So there we are. Hopefully none of the royal family are watching this. And if you are, don't be offended. It was just a joke made by Bill. He was just a funny guy. So if anyone else has got any funny stories, if not, we'll bring this to an end. I think we could. Reg, one last comment, one last funny story.
There's this one little story that I want to share about a guy named George Luz Jr.
Oh, okay.
I remember back in December, we commemorated the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. Of course, there's a lot of people attending. A lot of events were put together. And I was there doing little tours with Shane Taylor, who plays Doc Rowe in the series, and with Matthew Leach, Floyd Talbot. And with us was Chris Langlois, the grandson of Eugene Rowe, and actually put this event together to sell Chris's book. And Chris made a great book, child's book, How Easy Company Became a Band of Brothers. And we were actually there to promote it with the actors, with Chris, etc., etc. Now, there were two people from France, two very nice young girls who had signed in to the events, and actually to every event we had put up. Now, with the actors, they joined us. So the banquets, the Q&A in the movie theater, the battle tour, the sign. So they were there all weekend. They were really great girls, really. If you watch as girls, we already miss you a lot, okay? But on the last day, of the weekend, that Sunday afternoon, there was like a small signing scheduled. And I was just like walking around the room, just thinking of nothing. So being perfectly happy. But I noticed one of the girls were there, like in a corner, and they had tears in their eyes, and they were like crying. So I walked up to them and I asked, is something wrong? Was something happened? And they were really like all in tears. And they said, no, we just can't believe it's almost over. We had such an amazing time here the past 2 days, and now we have to go back, and it will all be over, and who knows if it will ever happen again. So I did my very best to try to stop them, to make them stop crying. And then I was getting there. So they slowed down crying. They were getting like kind of faces back to normal. And at that moment, George Luz Jr. walks in. So everybody knows when George Luz walks into the room, everybody starts to smile because he makes just everybody happy. Yep. True, Paul. True. You can only confirm that. When George walks in, it's like sunshine walking into the door. And I was like, this is the right guy at the right place on the right moment. So I was like, George, come here. So I was introducing Mr. Nice Guy, Teddy Bear, to the semi-crying girls, like to make them feel better. So I said, George, oh yeah, yes, so they got together. And then what does George do? He opens his backpack and he takes out this very special coin, challenge coin, that was made by his father, designed by his father. So it's just like one of the first ones, George. But it's like
those were by Walter Gordon.
Oh, by Gordon. They were they're the one by Gordon. So he gets it out of his backpack and says, "You know what this is?" And he describes the importance of it. And he goes like, "Well, these are for you." It's like, oh God, I got this. They were even crying harder than before. I was like, "Thank you, George." Anyway, that was it.
No, you're right, thank you, George. I mean, I don't want to turn into a backslapping thing, but there's, those people, there's factions, there's rivalry between tour companies and foundations, and not everybody agrees with everybody else, not everybody gets on with everybody else. George had his ability to just be like Sweden or Switzerland, coasting his way through, friends with everybody, friends with that side, friends with that side. Yeah. As soon as he arrives, it's just this Henry Kissinger-like mediation presence. Everyone forgets all the bitchiness, and thanks for being that kind of person, George, because the world needs more George Luz's, because there's way too much rivalry and nonsense in this hobby, business, whatever you want to call it, remembering World War II. And you're honest and pure about why you do what you do, George. So thank you for being a good ambassador for not just the Men of Easy Company, but for the USA and traveling overseas, because you are one of those lovely Americans that comes over, and we miss you this year. Mag really, she doesn't care about me. I'm in the next room, but she misses you, George, and she misses you, Reg. And so thank you very much to you, two of my best friends, coming on and talking about this stuff, because it's been fun. We said we'd do an hour. We've done nearly 2. I knew it wasn't going to be an hour. People said it. They said it's been a great show. So we'll do another one sometime. We'll do an X-rated after midnight kind of expletives allowed.
Oh yeah, because I got this other book. It says past midnight stories. So
yeah, no, I mean that's the thing with Bill Garnier, and some of those those stories were off the record, and indeed in a kind of a serious sense, they would say these.
Well, not just Garnier. You got
these stories like, this isn't for my kids. This isn't for other people. This is just for you, and they'd share stuff with you because you kind of got what they were talking about sometimes. So we could do an X-rated one at some point, a Quentin Tarantino edit one anyway, but I'm going to bring it to an end. So Reg, thank you very much, my friend. I'll see you again. We'll do some stuff again. Thank you very much, George. People have absolutely loved what you've done. For those watching again, if you haven't already, click subscribe to WW2 TV. If you might consider being a patron, the details are below. We've got other live streams coming up next week. July the 8th, we're doing Operation Charnwood, the attack into Caen, Battlefield live stream. I'm away this weekend. There's nothing this weekend, doing family things. And then more ones coming up. So I'll let you know, keep everyone posted on Twitter and Facebook. But this has been a great show. Just three friends talking about stuff, really. But it's been amazingly entertaining. And those audio clips are absolutely priceless. So thank you so much again for sharing with everybody. And on behalf of the audience, thank you, George. Thank you, Reg. This is Paul Woodadge saying I'll end the stream now. So thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Right, we're done. It's just